Hello everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about Atom, and with its most recent parabolic run over the last couple weeks, if it still has upside potential left, or if it might need to cool down for a little bit. If you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter, where we put out regular updates about our risk indicators and more. So if you've been following the markets, you might have noticed that Cosmos and its native token Atom has been doing quite well recently. Atom has actually over 2x'd from where it was at the bottom of the correction in the middle of December, and has since been just kind of on an overall parabolic run to the upside. It's now knocking on the door of its previous all-time high. So what I want to talk about is, what does our risk indicator, the upside downside potential indicator, think about this move? Does it think that Atom still has more gas left in the tank, or might Atom be running out of steam, at least in the short term? So if you've been following the channel, you're familiar with our risk indicator. Here I'm showing you the price action of Atom over time, with each dot being a day, and each day color-coded based on the output of our risk indicator. So 5 is high risk, -5 low risk. Or another way of thinking about this is 5 is when the upside potential is quite low, downside potential is quite high. -5 is when the downside potential is quite low, upside potential is quite high. And if you saw the recent video that we put out on the channel, you'll know that we actually now have new versions of the UDPI that allow us to do things that the older version couldn't. And one of the things that we can do is look at different time frames, look at risk across different time frames. So what I'm showing you here is actually the longer term version of the Atom UDPI. And really what this version of the UDPI is looking at is broader risk across that developed over months. So it's more curious about, at the market cycle level, kind of these broader movements that Atom has done. These kind of general regions where Atom has been low risk, good accumulation zones, as well as these general regions that's been high risk, that getting in has maybe not been advantageous because oftentimes corrections have preceded or not too far after followed from those points. But if we want to ask the question about this current run that Atom's putting in, we can get different information by looking at different versions of the UDPI. So with this longer term version, you'll notice that even with Atom going on a bit of a moon mission right now, the longer risk model isn't super concerned yet. On a bigger time scale, on kind of a more macro perspective, it doesn't think that this is really signifying a tapping out of longer term upside potential for Atom. You know, it doesn't think that this is the same as what we saw here, or what we saw here coming out of the summer yet, at the very least. You know, maybe it's something a little bit more kind of like this move, or a move where it's been a pretty nice move to the upside, but it's not yet at the point where the model thinks that it's really kind of tapping out long-term upside potential, and that it'll take a long time before we'd be able to put in another big move up. You know, like if you look at the time between this red zone here in early 2021, it took, you know, almost a full year before, or many months before Atom was able to go in and break through those levels, put in a new all-time high. But if we're interested more in a short-term question, then the better model to look at is not the long-term version of the UDPI, but the short-term version. And really what this version of the UDPI is better at picking up on is the shorter-term moves in the action. Basically, is Atom tapping out its more short-term upside potential, and might maybe in the short term doesn't need to kind of stop and consolidate a bit before it can move back more to the upside. That's what this model is more geared to tell us. And if you look at the short-term version of the UDPI, it tells a similar story to the longer-term version, where we did actually re-enter the green zone in this correction coming into late 2021. You know, we see that it came down to the green zone here as well. But now for this kind of more short-term upside potential, the shorter focused UDPI, the UDPI that cares more about short-term upside versus downside potential, thinks that Atom is actually getting kind of overextended. That in the short term, this model thinks it's unlikely that Atom will be able to continue to just keep moving up like this in the short term. Now, it might be able to move up a bit more. I'll show you in a minute the exact level. It's about 3.5 right now. So it's not tapping out by any means. It still could have moved to the upside. But really, my interpretation of this output is that it might suggest that, at least in the short term, this Atom might have to slow down in its growth, or maybe just kind of chill out. Maybe it'll break its all-time high, but it's probably not going to from this model's perspective, keep just going parabolic up to, $100 or something like that. Like, that's unlikely for it to be able to do that. It's probably going to need to kind of slow down, consolidate a bit. Maybe something a little bit like what we saw here, where it kind of put in a first big run, had to consolidate for a while before being able to move back up. Now again, because this is short term, this is not to say that we have to see the second parabolic run that close after if this were to happen, right? It could happen, sure. Or it could be something more like what we saw back here, where it goes, taps out some of its short-term upside potential, and then actually corrects downwards. This short-term version of the UDPI is not super concerned about this kind of market cycle-wide risk. That's not what it's telling you. It's telling you more about short-term risk. So it's not concerned about not as concerned about where Atom is in its kind of broader market cycle. It cares more about where is Atom right now in terms of its shorter-term risk, shorter-term upside versus downside. Whereas again, this model, the longer-term version, is much more concerned about those longer market cycle-wide swings in risk, that kind of macro risk. This is more micro risk. So essentially what this is suggesting is that at least on the short term, this big parabolic move we're seeing from Atom might be getting near its end. But again, that doesn't mean that Atom has to dump after that or anything like that. But it might suggest that at least some consolidation in this newer price range might be needed before Atom can move back to the upside. It's unlikely for the parabolic move to continue, essentially, is what this model thinks. Now, none of this is financial advice. You should make your own decisions about how to interpret this data, or any decisions or anything like that. That's totally up to you. But I did just want to share this because Atom has been going nuts, and I was curious how what its risk level was, and how its short-term risk was looking. So I wanted to share this information with all of you. But again, how you want to interpret this information or how you want to consider it is totally up to you. I'm not offering any advice about how to use this data. So to just wrap us up, I want to talk a little bit more about the exact levels and then also compare the different versions of the UDPI that we're monitoring for Atom. So what we can see here is that again, the longer-term Atom risk, it is increasing, which is to be expected. As you're kind of going up to break an all-time high, you would expect risk to be rising across the time frames. But you'll notice that it's not getting incredibly concerned yet. It's only a little bit above zero, which means that kind of a macro scale, it still thinks the upside potential for Atom is about the same as its downside potential, meaning that kind of in the longer term, across months, there's still a lot of room for Atom to potentially accrue going forward. It's not likely that we're at some kind of cycle or topping out point where a big correction is likely to follow. We're kind of in a more neutral place right now. And then the medium term, I didn't show you the overall graph for this, but essentially the medium term, you can think of it as kind of sitting in the middle. This is more kind of thinking about more of a weekly kind of time frame, how things play out over weeks. And it's, as you expect, up there, but also not terrified yet. And so if Atom were to kind of slow down or consolidate for a while, this risk might hang out here for a while, maybe even fall before Atom maybe could put more work to the upside. Although who knows, Atom could just correct off of this. We don't really know. It might depend a little bit on what Bitcoin does. I think if Bitcoin were to really dump from its current kind of range it's stuck in, if it were to go down to maybe 42K, or even if it were to fall below that especially, I would expect Atom, along with the rest of the crypto market, to really dump despite all the strength that Atom is showing right now. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens with all of that. And then, of course, as we were seeing with the short term, the risk is rising quite rapidly. And so at a rate of 3.51, this is getting to the point where on the short term, the prospects for Atom, it seems like the bulk of its move is likely in. Kind of the bulk of this big impulsive move has likely already happened. It's unlikely for us to see Atom just in the short term 2x again. Anything's possible, could certainly happen, but from this model's perspective, that would be very unexpected for Atom to be able to put in that much more work that quickly in the short term. But again, just because Atom is tapping out its short-term potential does not mean it has to go ahead and dump, does not mean to say that it can't keep going up higher in the coming weeks or certainly the coming months. It's just saying that in the coming days, the likelihood of Atom being able to continue to go crazy like this is probably nearing its end. It's probably unlikely for it to be able to continue moving like it has been moving. But again, not to say that can't happen, it's just from the model's perspective, it's unlikely. Now, the final thing I did just want to say, this is just more kind of an observation I've had about the market, is it's kind of interesting how well assets like Atom or Phantom, for example, have been doing given what Bitcoin's doing. You know, usually when Bitcoin is kind of in a downtrend, or at the very least, like we're seeing it right now, kind of stuck in a range at a significantly lower than its all-time high, you know, oftentimes altcoins don't do all that well either. Oftentimes they get very much punished. People are very quickly selling any pump that the altcoins are putting in because they're kind of the sentiment of the market's not that great because Bitcoin's not doing well. So I do think it's just kind of interesting how assets like Atom have actually been quite strong, even as Bitcoin has been looking quite weak, or at the very least uncertain. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of shapes up. I'm going to be watching a number of altcoins as we go forward and see if other ones are able to rally like Atom has, or maybe Atom is a bit of an outlier, or ones like Atom and Phantom, or some of those have been rallying recently. Maybe they're more of an outlier. It'll just be an interesting thing to watch, but I think it's certainly a vote of confidence for Atom that's been able to do this well in market conditions that haven't been especially bullish right now. And it could be that there's aspects of Atom, like it's focused on interoperability, that kind of maybe the narratives are shifting of what people care about or what people are valuing, and maybe something like interoperability is going to be the next thing that people are going to be watching. We'll have to wait and see. Who knows? But certainly that's something that Atom has going for it, and it'll be interesting to see if other assets that are more focused on that dimension, interoperability, also have some time in the sun, or maybe not. You know, maybe Atom's an outlier. Maybe there's some other aspect of Atom that people are valuing. But just something that I've noticed that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. If you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. And remember, with the UDPI, we're all going to make it.